Weekend, and it's an honor to be with you. Thank you, David and Cindy. It's great to have Robert and Donna Shula here and all the rest of you. I'm going to jump into my presentation. So there are about 5,000 or 6,000 years of recorded history. The writing was invented around 3,000 or 4,000 BC. Sumerian cuneiform on clay tablets, right? You take a stick, poke it in clay, that's the beginning of writing. Neil deGrasse Tyson, an astrophysicist, said on his Cosmos TV series, it was here around 5,000 years ago between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that we learned how to write, right? So 5,000 years ago. You round out 6,000, that's only 60 people living 100 years each back to back, right? How many of you have met someone who's lived 100 years or close to it? Maybe a grandmother? We're talking 60 grandmothers, and you're all the way back to the beginning of recorded human history. Not that long ago. And now that we have 6,000 years of records, let's look at them. What do they show? They show there's been a 6,000-year quest to rule the world, right? So the first story in these records is Nimrod, Tower of Babel. And the Jewish commentator Josephus said Nimrod wanted to build a tower so high that if God destroyed the world again with a flood, he could survive on top. And so he had this defiant, in-your-face attitude toward God, and he made everybody bake bricks and bring them, or he would kill them. So he's persecuting people. And God comes down, confuses the languages, and the people scatter. And it's almost like every generation since has tried to rebuild the Tower of Babel. But only on a bigger scale, because each time it comes around, it's a little worse. Because with military advancements, you can kill more people, right? Iron's stronger than the bronze and so forth. And so, have you ever seen the movie The Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger? There's this killer metal robot for the future, they blow it up, and everybody's sighs relief, but then it melts, little pieces melt into silvery droplets, they roll together, and this thing tries to climb out again. And so we see that God separated the power of the Tower of Babel, but every generation since tries to rebuild this thing. Yeah. And if you've ever seen a seashell, it does this little circle, bigger circle. It's a rate of expansion. I decided to look at all the kingdoms that have existed in 6,000 years and see they grow at the same rate. And so you have Nimrod, Tower of Babel, and then around 2500 BC, Gilgamesh, king of Uruk and Iraq. And he had this brand new invention called a wall. He was the first one to build a wall around the city. And he went on this long journey to meet this old guy who survived the global flood. And anyway, and then around 2250 BC, Sargon of Akkadian, first empire, conquers from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. And then there's 2,000 years of Egyptian pharaohs. And then there's 5,000 years of Chinese emperors. And 700 BC, Assyria is the biggest empire in the world. Nineveh is the capital, right? Took the 10 northern tribes of Israel captive. Then you have Assyria conquered by Babylon. And then Babylon's conquered by Persia. And then Persia is the biggest empire in the world. Remember, Cyrus lets the Jews go back and rebuild their temple. But Persia is conquered by Alexander the Great. And so around 330 BC, Alexander the Great has the biggest empire in the world, conquers from Greece all the way to India. And then India has Chandragupta, and he has the Gupta Empire, a quarter of the world's population under his control, even way back then. And then about 25 BC, Augustus Caesar has the biggest empire the planet Earth had ever seen. Matter of fact, he wanted to have a tracking system called a worldwide census, something about dictators that want to track everybody. And then you have the about 400 AD, Attila the Hun conquers the world in the area. The Christians thought he was the Antichrist at the time. And then you have Justinian and the Byzantine Empire around 527 AD. And then Islam comes along and conquers from the Persian Gulf to the Atlantic Ocean in the 7th, 8th century. And then it stops, and Charlemagne becomes the Holy Roman Emperor of Europe around 800 AD. And then Genghis Khan, at 1200 AD, conquers from Korea to Hungary, kills 30 million people. And then his grandsons, Kublai Khan, runs China. And then Tamerlane in the 1300s conquers all of Central Asia, kills 17 million. And then Ivan the Terrible controls Russia in the 1400s, 12 time zones. It's enormous. And then you cross the Atlantic and you have Aztec Montezuma. And he not only controls people, they take captives and drag them to the top of the temple and rip their hearts out. And Atahualpa of Inca, Peru. Did you know in Peru, every single citizen was an employee of the government? And then Spain, 1500s, has the largest empire the planet Earth had ever seen. Sun never set on the Spanish Empire. The Philippines are named after his son, King Philip of Spain. And the late 1600s, early 1700s, France has the biggest empire that the world had ever seen. And then in the late 1700s, early 1800s, England has the largest empire that planet Earth had ever seen. 13 million square miles, 500 million people. All of India, a quarter of the world's population right there. Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, British Guyana, Canada, America. And America's founders decided they wanted to break away from this globalist one world government king. And so they broke away. And now one of the dynamics we see is it keeps repeating itself because it's in each of our own fallen, selfish human nature. Come on. Right? So you have Cain killing Abel, and one king taking a kingdom from another king. St. Augustine called it libido dominandi, the lust to dominate. And so you put some babies in a playpen, one takes the rattle from the others. You put some kids on a playground, one's the bully. You put some junior high girls in a clique, one is the diva. You put some natives in the woods, one of them is an Indian chief. You put some people in an inner city, one of them is a gang leader. And all the king is a glorified gang leader. It's a structure where if you're friends with the king, you're more equal. You're not friends with the king, you're less equal. You're an enemy of the king, you're dead. It's called treason, or you're a slave. And so it's this pyramid structure to society that keeps repeating itself through 5,000 years of history. Why? Because it's in each of our own human DNA. Right? So what if you were the king? That'd be pretty cool, right? And then let's say you have a sister you really love, and she has a kid, and now he's a teenager, and he's drinking, partying, hits someone with the car, kills him. And now this teenager is facing manslaughter charges, mandatory prison, and your sister comes begging to you and says, you're not going to let my little Johnny get locked away, are you? It wasn't his fault. Those other kids talked him into it, blah, blah, blah. What are you going to say to your sister? Well, I'll let little Johnny off the hook this time, but don't let it happen again. Guess what? As soon as you say that, you are the corrupt dictator. You just sent ripples through your kingdom that if you're family or friends with the king, you get special treatment. You're not family and friends, you don't get it. And if someone wants to point out your favoritism, you're going to be tempted to want to shut them up. So it just happens. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so this pull is in our selfish human nature. It's like gravity. And remember the movie Lord of the Rings? There's a line where Gandalf tells Frodo, always remember, Frodo, the ring is trying to get back to its master. It wants to be found. Power wants to concentrate. And so he's take this nature of Cain killing Abel, Nimrod, the Pharaoh, Caesar, Kaisers throughout 6,000 years, and eventually wants to have a one world government, right? So that's where it's headed. And now, the kings rule by claiming they were divinely appointed, right? So the creator gives the power to the king, and he dispenses it to the people. So here's King Louis the 14th, the Sun King of France. He says, I am the state. Another place, they said, this is illegal. He says, it's legal because I wish it. And then there's King James of England, right? He says, kings are God's lieutenants upon earth, sit upon God's throne, overlord of the land, master over every person, having power over the life and death of everyone. And so you can begin to see England has this large empire. It took centuries, millennia, for America to get a chance to break away from a king. And James Wilson, a signer of the Declaration, said after a period of 6,000 years since creation, the United States exhibits to the world the first instance of a nation assembling voluntarily and deciding that system of government under which they should live. Daniel Webster, Secretary of State, miracles do not cluster. What has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again. Hold on to the Constitution. For if the American Constitution should fail, there will be anarchy throughout the world. Yeah. Why? Because for 6,000 years, people say, if only we can be free from kings and we can rule ourselves, and we've done it. And if we blow it, then nobody has anything else to look forward to. So how did America come about? 1500s, the most powerful kings. The Muslim Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, and the King of Spain, Charles V. And so the Sultan controls this whole huge area that used to be Christian. He's at the gates of Vienna. And at the same time, Martin Luther starts the Reformation. And so the King of Spain feels like he has two problems. Muslim invasion on the outside, and this Reformation on the inside. And so he tries to stop the Muslims, finally realizes he needs the Protestants' help. So he does a deal. It's called the Peace of Augsburg of 1555. It's the first treaty ever to recognize Protestants. And in this treaty is a little Latin phrase, cuius regio, ius religio, which means whose is the reign, his is the religion. In other words, look, Protestant king, believe whatever you want in your kingdom. Let's just work together against this Islamic invasion because they sort of want to kill us all. And it worked. But in the next century, different kings believed different things. And so it was one Christian denomination per country in Europe. And what the king believed, the kingdom had to believe, and if not, you were persecuted and you fled. And so in England, you had the king said, okay, you can read the Bible in your own language, but you have to believe what I tell you. And so he passes the Act of Uniformity in Prayer, which means if you have 5 people meeting in your home and you're talking religion without approval of the king, you're all criminals, they'll bust into the house and arrest you. They passed the 5 Mile Act. If you're caught preaching within 5 miles of a town, they arrest you, drag you before the Star Chamber, and they twist your arm, cut off your ear, brand you on the face as a heretic, cut your nose in half, right? And so they would put you in the Newgate prison until you starved to death. This is why the Pilgrims fled England. And they went to Holland, and then when the Spanish attempted to invade Holland, they fled again. They were going to go to Jamestown. And it was a king-run colony. And they get caught in a storm, they get blown off course, they land 500 miles north, Massachusetts. You think, oh great, just sailed on the coast. Well, it's stormy, and off the coast of Massachusetts, it's really shallow, and they had 3,000 wrecks there. It's called the Graveyard of Ships. The Pilgrims almost sink. The captain takes them back to Plymouth, says everyone off the boat. They say, we have a question, who's going to be in charge of us? We were going to go to Jamestown, submit to the king's government. There's no king-appointed person on our little Mayflower. They do something unique. They give themselves the authority to start a government. It is called the Mayflower Compact. It starts off, we, in the presence of God, covenant ourselves together into a civil body politic to enact just and equal laws that shall be thought most meet or necessary, unto which we promise all due submission. Simple, revolutionary. It was a polarity change in the flow of power. Instead of top-down, ruled by kings, it's bottom-up, ruled by we. And so it's the difference between a dead pyramid and a living tree, where every root and every little capillary root sucks in nutrients to help keep this thing alive. Every citizen has to participate. And so where did the Pilgrims get this idea? Their pastor, John Robinson, considered one of the founders of the Congregationalist Church. So instead of the clergy-laity model, where the clergy does all the ministry and the laity is lazy and watches, it's this congregational model where everybody in the congregation is a part of the church. Everybody's supposed to do something, take care of the daycare, nursery, junior high, and as you're faithful in the little things, you're entrusted with much, you move up into leadership, right? Bottom-up form of government. And so this painting hangs in our U.S. Capitol. And so Pilgrims, this congregational form of government, comes from the Greek word ecclesia, which means assembly. And it's a gathering of citizens that come out of their homes. There were 6,000 citizens in Athens, and they would all come together and decide what's going to happen. And this is also the assembly of the Israelites. And so when Jesus says, upon this rock I'll build my ecclesia, as Pastor Rob said, he borrows this Greek word. And so he says, look, this is a body, everybody's going to be involved, right? And so King James, when he's translating his Bible, he didn't want the word ecclesia translated church. A congregation, he wanted it translated church because he wanted to be the head of the Anglican church. And so these non-conforming pastors in England had to flee. They fled first to Puritan, Massachusetts, and then when the Puritans began enforcing Puritan uniformity, they fled and founded new communities. So you have in New England, a pastor, John Lothrop, and his church founded Barnstable, Massachusetts. A pastor, Roger Williams, and his church founded Providence, Rhode Island. A pastor, John Wheelwright, and his church founded Exeter, New Hampshire. Pastor Thomas Hooker and his church founded Hartford, Connecticut. And so this is 50 years before Europe's Age of Enlightenment. These are pastors fleeing the Puritans, and so Reverend Thomas Hooker has his congregation ask him to preach a sermon on how to set up government. He gives a sermon in 1638 titled, "The Foundation of Authority is laid firstly in the free consent of the people." Wow. This is reflected in our Declaration, government by the consent of the governed. His sermon goes on. Now, why is this revolutionary? Because in Europe, it was the divine right of kings. The authority starts with the king being divinely appointed, he rules as God's lieutenant. No, it starts with the we the people. And so that's reflected in our Constitution. And so this sermon's written down. It's called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. It's the first written constitution in the New World. That's why Connecticut's called the Constitution State. And here's a plaque in England. Thomas Hooker, founder of the state of Connecticut, father of American democracy. Another plaque in England. Thomas Hooker, Puritan clergyman, reputed father of American democracy. A statue of Thomas Hooker at the Capitol in Hartford, holding a Bible. At the base, it says, leading his people through the wilderness. He founded Hartford. On this side, he preached the sermon, which inspired the Fundamental Orders. It was the first written constitution that created a government. His sermon created the government. And another plaque in Hartford. Thomas Hooker preached his famous sermon. The foundation of authority is laid in the free consent of the people. And then the people, 1639, passed the Fundamental Orders. And so the Fundamental Orders say the people can join ourselves together to be as one public state or commonwealth. Sounds like the Mayflower. We covenant ourselves together. And here's another plaque in Hartford. They have lots of plaques. Thomas Hooker's congregation established the form of government upon which the present Constitution of the United States is modeled. Do you grasp this? His sermon becomes the model for our Constitution. And so in New England, instead of separation of church and state, it was the pastors and their churches that created the state. How could you say pastors don't get involved in politics, but it's his sermon that's the Constitution? How could you say church members don't get involved in politics when all there was in Hartford was his church members? Right? And so Calvin Coolidge says the principles which went into the Declaration of Independence are found in the sermons of the early colonial clergy. And in order that they might have freedom to express these thoughts and opportunities to put them into action, whole congregations with their pastors migrated to the colonies. So in New England, they had an experiment. They realized that the kingdom of God could never be forced from the top down. Right? You had kings in Europe burning people at the stake, and they saw that Jesus never forced anyone to follow him. And if Jesus didn't force anybody, we can't. Well, how can the kingdom come if you're not going to force it top down? They thought if the majority of the people held godly values and elected representatives with their values, then the laws would be passed with those values, and the values of the kingdom would come voluntarily percolating from the bottom up, not forcibly shoved from the top down. So this is the change that happened in New England. Instead of divine right of kings, creator king people, it's the creator gives the rights and power directly to each person, and they choose from amongst equals who's going to fix the potholes in the roads. And so Calvin Coolidge says, placing every man on a plane where he acknowledged no superiors, he must inevitably choose his own rulers through a system of self-government. So where did these pastors in New England get their ideas? Little from England's Magna Carta, the Roman Republic, the Athenian democracy, but ultimately ancient Israel. That's right. They taught Hebrew at Harvard and Yale. And the Constitution was written, needed to be ratified, though, before it went into effect. They needed 9 states. So New Hampshire was in line to be the 9th, but it was having a deadlock. And so Harvard President Samuel Langdon shows up, gives them an address, the Republic of the Israelites, an example to the American states. It says, instead of the 12 tribes of Israel, we may substitute the 13 states of the American Union and see this application plainly. After his address, they vote, they ratify it, and the U.S. Constitution goes into effect. Our U.S. Constitution went into effect after the sermon, the Republic of the Israelites. And he said, what was the Republic? That was that first 400-year period when Israel came out of Egypt before they got King Saul. Right? And so this is the first instance in studying 6,000 years of civilizations. Ancient Israel, 1400 BC, comes out of Egypt. It's the first time you have a nation with millions of people and no king. And since there's no royal family to butter up next to it, everybody's equal. The law says there's no respect of persons in judgment, rich or poor, male, female, whatever color your skin, everyone's equal. Everyone's made in the image of the Creator. It's the beginning of the concept of equality on planet Earth. They had this concept of tolerance. Even though they were worshiping the one true God, they never felt compelled to force somebody to get the lamb and drag it to the temple. Here they were the first nation with private land ownership. You see, wherever there's a king, you never really own the land. It's always going to be conditional of you staying on the nice side of the king. In Israel, the land was permanently titled to each family. If they got in a pinch and sold it every 50 years, boom, the land reverts back to the family. This prevented a dictator from gathering up the land and putting the people back into slavery. If you own land, you can accumulate stuff. The Bible called that being blessed. Karl Marx called it being a capitalist, right? Anyway, in ancient Israel, they had no police. Everyone was taught the law. Everyone helped enforce the law. It was like everybody was deputized. We have a little of that today with traffic laws. Somebody weaving in and out of the lane, you take it upon yourself to honk the horn. And then they had no standing army. You have a king, he has an army to enforce his will. In Israel, every man was in the militia and armed and ready at a moment's notice to defend his family and his community. Israel had no prisons. Remember, Joseph was in Egypt. He was in prison for a couple years. In Israel, when a crime was committed, you immediately got the elders of the city, the accused. You went to the gates. You had the trial right then. Then there was a city of refuge you could run away to await a trial. Israel had a bureaucracy-free welfare system. In Egypt, when the people were poor, the Pharaoh would dispense the grain in exchange for the people giving up their lives. Right? It was centralized. Well, in Israel, when the poor people, when you had a harvest, you left the gleanings of your field, the corners, for the poor people to pick through. This way, the poor were taken care of on a cellular level. And then they had a system of honesty. God hates unjust weights and measures, and Israel got to choose their own leaders. So Moses spake unto the children of Israel, how can I alone bear your burden? Take you wise men and understanding and known among your tribes, and I'll make them rulers over you. It was an election process for each little town and village and city. They would elect their own elders. And so it's decentralized. And so anyone could be raised up into leadership. Gideon, here's Deborah, a woman. She's not related to royalty. She just knows the law, she's honest, the reputation spreads, and she becomes a national leader. Where else in the world could this happen? So Harvard President Samuel Langdon says the Israelites may be considered as a pattern to the world in all ages of government on Republican principles. From abject slavery, a mere mob, to a well-regulated nation under laws far superior to what any other nation could boast. Think of it. They go from 400 years of slavery, they can't even read, and suddenly they get downloaded the most unique form of government that planet Earth had ever seen, so contrary to human nature. And Israel was the first nation that could read. In Samaria, 1,500 cuneiform characters is only for kings and scribes. Egypt had 3,000 hieroglyphic characters only for pharaohs and scribes. Only 1% of Egypt could read. Reading and writing was the scribes' secret knowledge. They actually kept the hieroglyphs complicated on purpose as job security. It was the communication in the deep state. They knew what was going on, people were in the dark. China had 10,000 characters only for court records. And so only the upper class could read. We had little of that in America prior to the Civil War. They had laws making it a crime to teach slaves to read. Remember that? And when Moses comes down the mountain, he doesn't just have the law. He has the law in 22 characters. So easy to learn. Kids can learn it. First letter is Aleph. Second letter, Beth. Sound familiar? Right? And so in Israel, you had an educated, moral populace. Why? Because they're going to rule themselves without a king. And here's a Greek philosopher, Eupholomus. He says, Moses was the first wise man that taught the alphabet to the Jews, who passed it to the Phoenicians, who passed it on to the Greeks. So you take, now, spectrum of power. Total government one side, no government on the other. Total government, you have a king, he rules through fear. No government's anarchy, unless each person is taught the law. It's like everybody downloads a behavioral app on their iPhone. Right? Instead of a GPS telling you where to turn, it tells you how to act. And the Levites are the computer geeks that tell you how to download this thing. Right? Go to App Store, Google Play, line upon line, precept upon precept. And so everybody has their own copy of the law that they're taught. But the big question is, why would you follow it? What would motivate you to follow an internal moral? Israel had the key ingredient. There is a God who is watching everyone. He wants you to be fair, and he's going to hold you accountable in the future. So you're about to steal, nobody's around, and then you realize God is watching me. He wants me to be fair. He's going to hold me accountable in the future. Maybe I should hesitate stealing. So it creates something in your head called a conscience. If everybody in the country believes this, you can maintain complete order, safety, and security for property with no police. So when we say it's one nation under God, it's more than just a nice little acknowledgement. That's the motivating factor that makes this whole self-government system work. Anyway, so God knew that they would break the law, and so once a year they sacrificed the Day of Atonement so to clean everybody's conscience so they could start all over again. And so Reagan said, without God, there's no virtue because there's no prompting of the conscience. Democrat candidate for president, William Jennings Bryan, a religion which teaches personal responsibility to God gives strength to morality. There is a powerful restraining influence in the belief that an all-seeing eye scrutinizes every thought and word and act of the individual. Can you begin to see it? Now, what happens if you get rid of this God? Well, then you just have a bunch of rules that some white men made up. Why? Follow them. Some will, some won't, and those that won't are going to give in to their selfish side, their lust, their passions. They're going to start robbing, stealing, killing, going to turn into lawlessness, and then everyone's going to say, we need the government to come in with enough power to restore order. And the government comes in, takes everybody's guns, takes away all your freedom of speech and everything, and yeah, they'll restore order, but when the dust settles, you will have transitioned from the people ruling themselves, bottom up, back to a king ruling top down. And anyway, so what happened in ancient Israel? The priests stopped teaching the law. So you got Eli, the high priest, his own sons are sleeping with women in the very tent where the Ark of the Covenant is. And then there's another Levite with a silver graven image in the house of a guy named Micah, and you're asking yourself, what's this Levite doing with the graven image? Isn't that one of the commandments? You're not supposed to have them? He's not following the law anymore. And then another Levite with a concubine. The law says the Levite is to marry a virgin of his own tribe. Here he is, with a woman not even married to. They're traveling, they're in a house, they're surrounded by sodomites, something about that behavior that appears at the very last stages of a people ruling themselves. This casting off of restraints and yielding to passion. The poor girl gets raped and dies, and by the time you're grossed out with the story, you read this line, every man did that which was right in their own eyes. Why? Because the priest had stopped teaching them what was right in the Lord's eyes.
Good.
So they go to Samuel the prophet. They say, this self-government system is not working anymore. We want to be like all the other countries. We want a king. Samuel cries, and the Lord tells him, they did not reject you, they rejected me. And so what happens is they get King Saul. Interesting story. Saul's pouting that his son made a league with David because nobody cares. Doeg the Edomite says, King, I'm with you. I care. I saw David go to this town. They gave him some bread, the sword of Goliath. And Saul says, bring those priests here. Tell his men, kill those priests. The soldiers hesitate. Doeg the Edomite says, I'll kill him. Goes out there and kills them all. What just happened? The soldiers had been operating under the old system where each citizen is accountable to God to follow the law. And the law says, you need two or more witnesses before you condemn somebody to death. There's only one. So they're like, this does not compute. You're telling me to do something against the law. Doeg says, King, I'm going to surrender my conscience to you. You tell me to kill, I'll kill. Wherever you get a king, he wants you to give up your deeply held religious convictions. He wants, when he blows his trumpets, you have to bow to his statute. He doesn't care if you have a warm feeling in your heart for the statute. Right? It's if he says there's no more male and female, you just got to throw out 6,000 years of values and say, okay, government, whatever you say. And so in America, two kinds of pastors. For 150 years, Calvinist pastors, that says God has a plan for your life, marriage, family, church, government. Find the plan, put it in place. And so every member is involved. Word polis means city, politics, business of the city. And so the next is Germans, 1700s come over. These Germans are pietists. What's pietist? Well, remember Martin Luther starts the Reformation? And then some princes said, hey, this is my chance. I'm going to break away from Rome. Kingdom of mine, you're all now Lutheran. And they say, okay, King, we're Lutheran. What do we believe? So what had been a very personal experience for Martin Luther to the rest of the people, it's like, okay, whatever the government says. And so a revival movement starts called pietism that says, look, being a Christian is more than just agreeing with doctrine. You have to have a personal experience with Jesus. And when you do, your life will change. And you'll no longer do those worldly things that you used to do. Like go to bars, brothel theaters, get involved in lewd things, and get involved in government. Why? Well, government's worldly. It's got all kinds of sinful people. So if you're really Christian, you won't get involved. This was the beginning of separation of church and state. Don't get involved. And so this allowed Hitler to take power in Germany. The church had centuries of, well, we got two different spheres. There's the world and there's the church, and we're supposed to be involved in the church, and don't touch the government. It's worldly. And so Hitler's like, okay, I'll take care of the government. The church can't stop me. And it took millions of people around the world to die to stop Hitler because the church didn't. And so these Lutherans in the early 1700s came to America. They're pietists. There's two brothers. John Peter Muhlenberg, Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, they're pastor in Lutheran churches. John Peter goes and hears Patrick Henry's Liberty and Death speech. He gets fired up, like after hearing E.W. Jackson. And he goes to George Washington. And he says, hey, I want to help. And Washington says, okay, I'm going to make you a colonel. Go get your men. So he goes to his church. He has a sermon. There's a time for all things. Time to gather stones, time to scatter stones, time to preach, and time to fight. And he has an altar call. 300 men of the church come forward, kiss their wives goodbye. They ride off to become the 8th Virginia Regiment. And they fight in all kinds of battles, even Yorktown. He gets promoted to Major General. Then he's elected to Congress. He's in that first Congress where they passed the First Amendment. His brother, another pietist, Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, he's writing to John Peter during this time. He says, you have become too involved in matters which, as a preacher, you have nothing whatsoever to do. And John Peter writes back and says, well, you're a Tory British sympathizer. Frederick writes back and says he can't serve two masters. Then the British bombard New York, burn Frederick's church. His wife and kids have to flee the city. And Frederick says, maybe we do need to get involved. He ends up getting elected to Congress, and he's elected the first Speaker of the House. The first Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives is Lutheran pastor Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg. Yeah. He signs the First Amendment. Does anybody honestly think that these two pastors would vote to outlaw themselves? These old pastors aren't supposed to get involved in government when we're pastors and we did get involved and we're sitting here writing the First Amendment. So how did the church turn into covenant? Well, we got the Pilgrims doing a covenant type of government. Real quick, what's a covenant? It's people in agreement with each other, right from God, accountable to God. And in the next century, covenant turned into social contract. It's people in agreement with each other. If God's there, fine, but if not, the rights come from the group, and we're accountable to the group. Well, the next year it turns into the French Revolution of Marxism, which says, okay, there is no God, rights just come from the group, which makes the group God. And so what happens is, in France, they chopped off 40,000 heads, and Hegel says the state is God walking on earth, we must worship the state. Napoleon conquers, and so the Prussian king says, we got to strengthen the state. So Hegel is their philosopher. He says, all the worth which the human being possesses, he possesses only through the state. And Rousseau, father of the French Revolution, says, when the state says to a citizen, it is expedient for the state that he should die, he ought to die, because his life is a gift made conditionally by the state. Once you get God out of there, covenant turns into social contract, turns into the state being God. And so Pol Pot in Cambodia says, to keep you is no benefit, to destroy you is no loss. He kills a third of his own country. And anyway, so Hegel influenced Marx and Stalin. Hitler was the head of the National Socialist Workers' Party. Stalin, the Socialist Republics of Soviet Union. FDR says the Soviet Union is run by a dictatorship. So socialism is dictatorship. And anyway, the dictator's the new king. The party members are the new royalty. They're the deep state ruling elite, and then the people are the subjects. And I'm going to skip past some stuff. It's all in my book. So we go through these 6,000 years, and we see these kings get bigger and bigger and bigger. They got a global goal in mind. The King of England was the biggest. America's founders broke away and flipped it, and they made the people the king. We take the power of the king, break it into 3 branches. So who's the king in America? Signer of the Constitution, Gouverneur Morris. The magistrate is not the king. The people are the king. Chief Justice John Jay. The people are the sovereign of this country. Signer of the Constitution, James Wilson. Sovereignty resides in the people. Abraham Lincoln. The people of these United States are the rightful masters of Congresses and courts. Grover Cleveland. The sovereignty of 60 millions of free people is the working out of the divine right of man to govern himself. A manifestation of God's plan concerning the human race. So who's the king in America? We are. And so the word citizen means co-king. It's Greek. And every citizen forms a part of the sovereign power. He possesses a vote. And so we said, well, we got to submit to the authorities, Romans 13. Okay, well, who's the ultimate authority in America? We are. We are. It's not a king. The president is your servant. You hire him, you fire him, right? And so the government officials are all your servants. You, the people, are the final authority. Our founders set it up this way. And so imagine visiting a king in the Old Testament, going through the streets of Jerusalem, and you're seeing murder, rape, crime, all kinds of terrible stuff. You get into the king's chamber. He has his head in his hand. He looks all worried. He looks up at you. And he says, did you see all that terrible crime coming in here? I wish someone would fix it. You reach over and tap the king on the shoulder and say, excuse me, you're the king. This is your kingdom. You're the one accountable to God to fix it. That's like somebody in America watching TV. Seeing all the terrible stuff going on, saying, I wish somebody would fix it. Hello, have a finger reach through the TV tube and tap you on the shoulder. You're the king. You're the one accountable to God to fix this mess. John Jay, Americans are the first people whom heaven has favored with an opportunity of choosing the forms of government under which they should live. All other constitutions have derived their existence from violence or accidental circumstances. Your lives, your liberty, your property will be at the disposal only of your creator and yourselves. Wow. If I were to sum up what makes America great, it is this quote right here. Your lives, your liberty, your property are at the disposal of you and God. There's no government in between saying you can't live here, you can't go to, gotta go to this church, you gotta go to this mosque, you gotta wear this kind of clothes. You're in charge of your life. You basically get to be the king of your life, and then collectively we're the king of the country. And so Reagan said, in this country of ours took place the greatest revolution that has ever taken place in the world's history. Every other revolution simply exchanged one set of rulers for another. Here, for the first time in all the thousands of years of man's relation to man, the founding fathers established the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and ability to determine our own destiny. Can you see how unique America is? We pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic. A republic is where the people are king, ruling through representatives. And so when somebody protests the flag, what they're basically saying is, I don't want to be the king anymore. I protest the system where I participated in ruling myself. It's like, okay. So you get to be the king of your life. Collectively, we're the king of the country, and you have the opportunity of willingly submitting your lives to Jesus, the King of Kings. Because my people will be willing in the day of my power. So Jesus is the king, but he's the king through us individually submitting to him. So who's the king in America? We the people. Now, I'm closing here. So we've got 379 AD. Roman Empire becomes Christian. And Emperor Theodosius, he's Christian. He's going to church in Milan, Italy. The pastor is St. Ambrose. And anyway, could you imagine being a pastor and having the emperor in your church pew on Sunday? Wow. Guess what? That's exactly what we have in America. Pew Forum says 70% of Americans identify themselves as Christian, which means they're going to church, which makes the pastors counselors to the king. And you have two types of counselors. One tells the king to go to sleep, shirk your responsibility, don't get involved, be negligent, whatever happens, happens, you just sit there and focus on your own relationship with God, this pietism. Or another set of pastors throws ice water on their congregation and says, you don't just have the right to vote in America, you're going to be held accountable to God for what happens in America. Right? So you ever seen the movie The Lord of the Rings? There's a scene of a King Theoden, got the spell cast on him, he's really out of it. He has two counselors. One is this greasy guy named Wormtongue. Saying, stay asleep, don't wake up, don't get involved. Yeah, your kingdom's being overrun, but just be real spiritual and don't get involved. Another is this guy, Gandalf, comes in and he's a counselor to the king, and he basically casts the devil out of the king. Right before your eyes, the king starts to wake up and looks around and says, what's been going on? It's dark a bit in my dreams of late. Like, yeah, you've been out of it. And so he said, you'll remember your strength if you take your sword. And so the pastor's job is to wake up the king. The king is in your pews. And tell them that you don't just have the right to vote, you're going to be held accountable to God for what. If they're teaching stuff to little children that Jesus would not teach, Jesus said, in the beginning, God made them male and female. And so Jesus says, if you allow one of these little ones that believes in me to stumble, it's better that a millstone be put around your neck and you be thrown in the depths of the sea. So we, the king, the people, are letting them teach stuff that Jesus says will get a millstone be put around our neck. And so the most important thing is to bring people to Christ. The second most important thing is to preserve the freedom to do the most important thing. You need to realize that Martin Luther King Jr. says the church is the conscience of the state. Last thought, times of crises, people turn to Christ, and in times of crises, God raises up great leaders. Someday you're going to be dead. You're going to be in heaven, right? And we're going to be up there, and imagine being in Moses' living room, and maybe you got a big one like tonight, and maybe you're at a table, and then maybe Moses is at your table. And after all the small talk's over, you say, Moses, tell us a story. He'll tell a story, and it'd be great. Then Gideon's at your table. Gideon, tell us your story. David, tell us your story. And everybody at the table's finally got to look at you. Say, you tell us your story. What was going on earth when it was your turn to be on there? What were they saying about the baby in the mother's womb? What were they saying about the Ten Commandments? What did you do when the whole world was turning bad? What are you going to say? I hate to squirm in the seat and say, well, I threw a couple bucks in the offering plate. No, I said, let me tell you what was going on. They were teaching kids all kinds of anti-biblical stuff, and I stood up. And so anyway, God bless you. Thank you so much.